important. Okay, thank you all for being back. So we have our two wonderful featured readers. I'll start with the first and then I'll continue with the second. I think that's fine. Okay. Misha Solomon is a homosexual poet in and of Tiohtià, Montréal. He's the author of 2 chapbooks. His work has twice appeared in West Canadian Poetry and in journals across Canada. He's a student in Concordia's Interdisciplinary Humanities PhD program. His chapbook, My Great-Grandfather Danced Ballet, is his debut full-length collection. We are so happy and proud that you are reading to us tonight. Misha, please take the stage.
Postmodernity is, of course, a euphemism for internalized homophobia. In 1971, my grandfather bought a country house in Morin Heights that came with a ceramic statue of a turquoise unicorn. The unicorn is at rest, legs folded underneath itself, nestled on some clouds. Or not quite at rest, but posing, its head held high and its chin tucked to its chest, its twisted horn perpendicular to its brow, to its snout. The unicorn has a luscious mane, hair piled high as a shiny pompadour on an Elvis Presley wax figure. The unicorn's ass is surprisingly human and shockingly well-defined, 2 juicy cheeks beneath a tiny tufted tail. The unicorn is covered with a pattern of textureless cracks, so smooth and regular that they appear superimposed, a filter. The effect is an example of crackle, the technique by which a spiderweb of fine cracks is created in a ceramic glaze. Crackle is distinct from crazing, which is the same thing, but by mistake. The answer to an old-fashioned SAT analogy question would read, manslaughter is to murder as crazing is to crackle. Maybe the cracks are in fact an example of crazing, and maybe the statue was left behind in the Laurentian chalet because of its defect, or maybe it was left behind without forethought. In the 5 decades since my grandfather accidentally acquired the ceramic statue of a turquoise unicorn, unicorns have become gay. In the 5 decades since my grandfather accidentally acquired the ceramic statue of a turquoise unicorn, I have become both gay and acquired the ceramic statue of a turquoise unicorn. This unicorn lives in the home I share with my gay fiancé. I hesitated before acquiring the ceramic statue of a turquoise unicorn, before accepting my parents' offer to have it fill a previously unfilled corner in our apartment. I hesitated because intention is difficult to express in interior design without a plaque that reads, "We are gay, but this unicorn is not." I hesitated because one of the many curses of postmodernity is a refusal to be on the nose. They removed analogies from the SAT, but I'm only comfortable with crazing. Manslaughter carries a lesser sentence. Thank you so much to Planet Earth Poetry for having me. I am so honored to be here. This was actually the first event that I planned when I was connected with Kieran by Christina Shaw, who I read here a couple of years ago. Thank you to Christina. And it was the first event on my little tour calendar, and I'm so happy that it's finally happening, and so happy to be performing for such a great crowd at such a lovely place, and so excited to be reading with Zoe, who I know you are all very excited to see, and so happy to open for her, not by her choice, but by the hand of fate. So my book, My Great-Grandfather Danced Ballet, which came out in March with Brick Books, is a poetic exploration of an entirely fictionalized version of my great-grandfather, based only on the idea that he danced ballet in Romania before fleeing between the world wars, based on a sort of remembrance shared with me by my great aunt. And I constructed this entire fictional version of him as if he were a gay ballet dancer in Romania, and then in the 30s and 40s and 50s in Montreal. The book also explores my contemporary, much more homonormative life in Montreal, and the suite of poems I'm going to read tonight, including the one I just read, are more about that real life, a sort of a speaker close to author, and not the fictional stuff, which requires a lot more context than I have time for right now. And these poems really explore possession, material possession, art, sort of class and changing class, and money in a way that I hope is somewhat frank and not unappealing. So I'm just going to carry on with it. very hard not to be staring at myself here. Hi everyone. The next poem is called Help Me Choose a Photo of My Engagement Ring to Post on Instagram. Photo 1. Description. A white hand emerges from the bottom of the frame where a few dark wrist hairs are visible. The hand has 5 digits, 4 fingers and a thumb. Below the second knuckle of the second longest finger, the ring finger, sits in fact a ring. The setting of the ring is a matte gold disc, and from the disc emerge 6 sets of prongs, each holding one of 6 gems, 3 red, 1 green, 1 purple, and 1 yellow. The red gems are very small, the green gem is somewhat small and sparkles most, the purple gem is roughly hewn, and the yellow gem is star-shaped. Just under the ring, a few dark finger hairs are visible. The ring, by local queer designer Alexandre Bergeron, attempts to distract from the unmade bed in the background of the image. The bed's sheets, by French brand Carré Blanc but purchased locally, are red, but more sienna than the cherry of the 3 small gems. Analysis. The ring is clearly visible and transparently made visible, but there's a certain candidness in the position of my fingers and the messiness of the bed. I'm showing off the ring, to be sure, but I'm also just living my life. What a surprise, the photo seems to say. I didn't even have the chance to ask my now fiancé to make the bed or shave my knuckles. An important caveat. In this photo, the ring is on my right hand. Neither I nor the man who gave me the ring realized that engagement rings are meant to be worn on the left hand until a few female friends remarked on the error. Photo 2. Description. The aforementioned hand with the aforedescribed ring lies flat on a black table, the tips of its fingers holding open a greeting card from local stationery producer Paperol. The left side of the greeting card is blank, but on the right side is a note written in purple ink. Misha, cette année, tout l'amour que je veux t'exprimer tient dans une petite phrase, et dans une petite boîte, Guillaume. Analysis. The ring is still in the wrong hand here, and my gay fiancé Guillaume has asked that I stop sharing his intimate words publicly. It's a bit much, perhaps, to share the note that accompanied the proposal, but is it not also deeply humanizing? My mostly straight, mostly progressive followers do so adore gay love, and even my most ardently anti-marriage followers, of which there are approximately none, would surely be touched by such a pure evocation. Isn't millennial irony out in favor of renewed youthful earnestness? And how earnest, we two men in love, neither socialized to dream of rings, neither knowing where to put one. We're queering homonormativity, don't you see? This is radical, especially because I'm a top and we hardly have penetrative sex. Photo 3. Description. In the crisp foreground, the mirror image of the previous hand now wears the ring. In the blurry background sits a small black dog, a Shorkie from puppy country in nearby Saint-Rémy, who seems to be looking at the hand. The dog is seated on a black cushion, and a few brightly colored dog toys are strewn about the floor. Analysis. The ring is now on the correct hand. The inclusion of my puppy is a strategic win. The only thing my followers love more than gay love is dogs. We've done away with the overt posing of the second option in favor of a more natural background akin to the first option. My concern is the lack of narrative heft. The photo captures neither my genuine surprise and elation nor the rapidity with which I said we. Yes, I was truly surprised. What's that? Why did he have to do the asking? Why couldn't this have been decided jointly? Why are we recreating patterns we swore to swear off? Listen, I bet you didn't even know the thumb isn't a finger. The house on Circle Road. I barely remember the house, but I cried when I left it. Can recall an antique mirror on the floor, a flacon with my name on the side, a perfume by the Russian dancer who shares my name. My name, a name isn't owned. My parents own that house and that house alone. They rented, they rent, I rent still. I know more about the house than I remember, as if it were the site of a famed battle, the Plains of Abraham, the house in which my bris was held. What it could have offered, the raspberry bushes, the stairs, how I long for stairs. Stairs are a possibility, a suggestion of more. In a house, you don't always know what's up or down. You get that boxed cat mystery. That's what I want, to know less, to wonder more. A life without stairs is a life unowned. To own is to wonder, is this really mine? Instead of knowing, no it isn't. Nothing ever is. I'm going to now read, there's a suite of 3 sonnets called 3 Sonnets About the Art in My Home I'm going to read the 3 sonnets. I was deciding what to read tonight, and a poet friend in Montreal, Gwen Obe, who's a fantastic poet, her book might be here, posted on Instagram that she's doing the A-frame residency right now, and had taught one of these poems in a little workshop she was doing in Picton, and felt very kismety to have decided to read these poems here. So the last one is that poem. 3 sonnets about the art in my home. Inherited painting by unknown artist. She's looking at a painting by some old Italian master hung in a gilded frame upon a blue-gray wall, her leg outstretched as if to balance the weight of her consideration. Towards me, another painting, a landscape, maybe vivid colors. To her right, a large and temporary wall, another exhibit not yet ready. I've seen her in a photo, a design magazine from the 80s, a feature on my grandfather's cabin, the largest all-wood cabin in Canada at the time. She was, for a while, under my single guest bed. Now she's on my double occupancy wall. She lived in a cabin I visited pre-memory, so finds repugnant my nostalgia, her hip cocked mockingly. But she can never access the incomplete exhibit, stuck looking at some Jesus in his vermilion robes. She was bought with money we'll never see the likes of. We spent our final paycheck on the garish entry fee, only to find the cabin sold, the museum half closed. Gifted painting by Louise Scott. The painting's frame was originally more Baroque, but Guillaume didn't like it, so my father offered to spray paint it off white. I liked the gaudy gold frame, but Guillaume already didn't like the art itself, and love is compromise. My mother's dead gay friend gave me this painting for my bar mitzvah. He was alive then. In every upper-middle-class Jewish home in Montreal, you'll find a similar painting, moon-faced figures with Mona Lisa eyes at a carnival, or vaguely medieval, or lounging on a chaise, or at my parents' upper duplex, getting married. I have a fiance who has a foreskin, and there's no middle class anymore, and so my walls need this painting or they're not mine. Self-love is also compromise. I tell myself it's a painting, but it's really just a print. Thrifted milk jug by unknown artist. A solitary figure, pink, let's call him a man, sits and fishes beneath a large pink umbrella. Across the blue pond, green trees, blue clouds, pink sky. The man in the milk jug art puts down his rod, his umbrella, turns to me, says, "Hey man, do you want a blowjob?" My partner and I bought this decorative milk jug together in a church basement antique sale, not at a charming small-town church basement antique sale, at a reductive mile-end one. But we loved the colors, and now, look at me. I'm balls deep in this fisherman, and it turns out those weren't clouds across the pond. They were further trees, shadowed blue. This next poem is my only brief experimentation with concrete poetry in the book. The first 2 stanzas are shaped like a lobster claw, and you may understand why. The Seafood Buffet at Boca West Country Club, circa 1998 to 2010. There were people whose job it was to shake the lobster flesh out of the lobster claws. You'd go up to their station and ask for 6 claws, and they'd break the claws off 3 steamed lobsters and throw the remaining carcasses into a pile for those who wanted tail meat, presumably, or for those older Jews who, raised by survivors or survivors themselves, found pleasure in scraping the torsos and savoring the tamale, the greenish-brown organ mush. But some lobster bodies must have gone to waste. The extremities were much more popular than the interiors. Maybe they made for an impromptu staff meal. Maybe the lobster crackers, all men, mostly Eastern European, used the leftover meat and prepared ramekins of melted butter to woo 19-year-old white South African waitresses. But you didn't think too much about that. You just held out your preheated plate and accepted 6 lopsided V's of white and red meat and wondered if you'd make it to a dozen by the end of the night or save room for shrimp cocktail and molten lava cake. And you did this at 10 and 11 and 12 and so on. Childhood and adolescence punctuated by seafood buffets, punch drunk on privilege and too inured to it to criticize, an annual decadence you never knew would end. And then it did, because someone paid for those lobsters, paid so much he could hardly afford his mostly publicly funded nursing home. So it's been a decade since your last buffet, and all you want to know is, can you be nostalgic for something that never should have been? I just have one more poem that sort of wraps up the suite. I'm calling it a suite. It does not appear as a suite in this book, but it's a thematic suite for this evening. Planet Earth special. So the grandfather that I've talked about in a few of these poems is not the great-grandfather in question. I didn't include I thought about including a sort of like you'd seen a fantasy novel, a kind of a map or family tree. I did not, but this grandfather is the great-grandfather's son-in-law in theory and in practice. This is a poem that sort of deals with him most directly. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to my gay fiance Guillaume for being here and for being such a good sport. And my mother Heidi is also here. It's been a lovely trip on your lovely island in your lovely city. So thank you. I try to get my grandfather to tell me things his parents told him. He tells me instead about Lily St. Cyr at the Gaiety, whose burlesque act was Montreal's hottest ticket and the clergy's cause célèbre. Lily St. Cyr was born Marie Frances von Schack in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She began to dance professionally in a chorus line. She was known for quality, a high-class performer. All this is freely available on Wikipedia, laid bare, no need for a tasseled reveal. But I don't know where my grandfather's father was born, or why his mother's name was spelled Doris, D-O-R-Y', pronounced Doris, but with an apostrophe suggesting ownership, contraction, turning away. I know that my grandfather was born in Montreal and lived here all his life, save for a stint in Laval. I know he went to Spain right after high school and saw the Bulls. I know he had a hockey coach who was known to be a creep. I know he owned a dress company. I know he lost a son. I know last year he wanted to give away his son's jean jacket, a child's jacket from the 70s, the biggest size his son ever wore. He kept it for decades, but just couldn't look at it anymore. I know my mother took the jacket and it's in her closet. I know he met Wayne Gretzky, Jay Leno, Jean Chrétien. I know because he has photos stuck to the walls of his nursing home apartment. As he gave my fiance a tour of his photo walls, he got to a photo of his son and said, he was only 14 and wailed for a moment, a true wail from the pit of his stomach, one solitary wail. And then he was back to ski trips and country homes and the cheetah he somehow rented for his son's bar mitzvah. Back to emblems of a life well-lived, too well-lived to be able to keep living well. And I want to follow that wail back to its source, to that first primal wail when the doctor spanked his tushy after he came out of Doris. Ride that wail back through history and across an ocean. I want that wail to serve as the opening note of my own little theatrical review, where all my dead come out and dance to the tune of their mother's lullabies and end their act by peeling off one glove. They're wearing gloves, I didn't mention that. Stretching out their hands to me so I can touch their skin and see if it feels like my skin or own or somehow very different, rougher perhaps, or maybe smoother, a chorus line of genealogy. I'm sure Lily St. Cyr put on a fabulous show. I wish I could have seen it. It's just that burlesque is still freely available, a ticket away, but all my other grandparents are dead, and the last time I saw my grandfather, it took him a second before he knew me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more round of applause for Misha Solomon. On a personal note, Misha, words like erfurt described make the inner German speaker in me frolic. This is beautiful, beautiful. We all should compound more of these words. Speaking of languages, just out of curiosity, who in this room has taken classes in ancient Greek? Raise your hand. Oh, Zoe, what a surprise. Zoe Dickinson has published 2 award-winning chapbooks, Public Transit and Intertidal, Poems from the Littoral Zone. Her poetry is rooted in the Pacific coastline of BC, where she is manager at Russell Books. And this is a title I didn't know existed before I read this. Artistic Director Emerita of the Planet Earth Poetry Reading Series. Staff Picks for Invertebrates is her first full-length collection. I can't wait to hear. Zoe, please.
Thank you, Tor. It's so appropriate to have you introducing me tonight because Torsten also worked at Russell Books for some time. And thank you, Misha, that was wonderful. So good. I also just want to start by saying how grateful I am to Russell Books and all of my coworkers, past and present, and my bosses, Andrea and Jordan, who are family and who are just so supportive and wonderful, and agreed to pre-order like 50 copies of my book so that I could convince Raincoast to carry it. This is the local distributor. Anyway, so this is really a wonderful place, and this book wouldn't exist without Russell Books and the people in it. So yeah, I'm really excited to be reading from it here and at PAP, which is sort of my poetic home. So here we go. I thought I would focus on the ones that, well, I've got a couple of greatest hits, but I tried to put in some that maybe you haven't all heard before. And I'm kind of going to lean into the bookstore poems this time because this is sort of my first bookstore reading in the bookstore. So the book itself goes to and from the ocean and the bookstore, and my kind of commutes in between. But you're mostly going to get bookstore poems tonight. So if you want to read the ocean poems, you've got to buy the book. First, I'm going to read, this is kind of like an intro to the bookstore, one of the poems that kind of introduces you to the bookstore. It starts with an epigraph that was said to me by a customer. He said, "I have friends who can talk to trees. Did you know trees whisper in English?" This was said by a customer as he purchased a pocket-sized King James Bible. This poem is called Trees Whisper. All around me, trees whisper in English. At night after closing, aisles rustle, a ghost grove, each shelf a branch, each book a leaf on the tree it once was. Every few nights at 4 a.m., Tolstoy leaps off the shelf, triggering our alarm. A technician comes to adjust the sensitivity of the system. Still, our first task each morning, rescue books fallen face down, autumn leaves placed back on stems. In a used bookstore, anything ever published might be on the shelves, but over time, what remains is what doesn't sell, deadwood, a slow creep of natural unselection. I run my finger down spines, search for stagnant stalk to prune, but I know we won't bear to part with any of it. We'll simply respread like mulch into other sections. Maybe this will sell in garden writing? A sudden hailstorm pelts. We bring the sidewalk display inside, worry about the cherry trees, foolishly blooming too soon. This is one of those greatest hits ones, the Funny Beavers poem, which I felt, especially because Joanne is here tonight, this was actually my lovely coworker Joanne's experience, which she kindly allowed me to turn into a poem. Context. She approaches the customer service desk and says, "Funny beavers." Just that, and waits. I search for a clue. Is that the title of a book? But no, she just wants books about beavers, humorous beavers specifically. I sell her A Beaver's Eating My Canoe and That Damn Beaver. She leaves without another word, not even thank you, as though we've met her minimum expectations, as though the world should function like a Google search, autofill all her desires. She arrives home, strips off the human skin with a sigh of relief. shoves her new books into a dry bag, and dives into the creek. Giggles echo off the mud and stick balls of her dam as she reads about funny beavers. Finally, some humor she can relate to. So thanks, John. John inspired at least 2 poems in this book. This next one, I wanted to put some weird customer poems in here. So what is an indie bookstore without the weird customers? We love them. We love them. This was also not my experience. This was Dana's experience, previous Dana, not current Dana, from a couple years ago, who used to work here. This is called Dumbstruck. The child leaning over the escalator railing meets my eyes for a long moment before bringing his hands to his mouth, fills each palm with saliva, rubs them together like defibrillator pads about to revive a patient, clear, before placing them on the escalator's smooth rubber handrail. Together, we watch the conveyor belt carry his spit around its endless circle, dark stain lengthening with each rotation. Dumbstruck, how inexplicable we are to each other. Just to hold your applause, guys. Thank you. Let's save it for the end. This also was during the height of the pandemic, so you gotta imagine COVID and the spit. Yeah. This is the title poem, which I wrote in my desperate attempt to find a title for this book. And in this poem, I'm recommending books to various invertebrate creatures. So it is called Staff Picks for Invertebrates. For the Hermit Crab, Ghost Rider travels on the Healing Road by Neil Peart. This book will have you casting off last year's shell. Sometimes you need to molt home to find where you belong. For the Sea Urchin, 50 Hats That Changed the World by Design Museum. A sun hat is a must in shallow waters when you're all round punk-spiked head. And why make do with shards of shell or faded bottle caps? This book will inspire your fashion awakening. Side note, Google sea urchin hat. There's people 3D print these hats. Anyway, check it out. For the acorn barnacle, Ovid's Metamorphoses. What else to recommend for the bearer of the world's longest penis? When you feel stuck inside your calcium fortress, this book will remind you how much there is inside you to unfurl, how much you can transform yourself for love. For the oyster, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. Rick understands this essential truth about pearls and poetry. What we create will coalesce around the things we need to heal or conceal. For the nudibranch, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. Also, Google nudibranchs. If you don't know what they are, Google them. They're a type of sea slug. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. Not that you need the reassurance. You gave up on shells long ago and rarely give a hoot about camouflage. You living flame of unconditional color wandering the waters. But I think you'll enjoy Mark's down-to-leaf approach. For the sea star, If Not Winter, Fragments of Sappho, translated by Anne Carson. You who can recreate yourself from a single limb will appreciate the tenacity of these words, ripped up and resurrected fragment by fragment from the garbage dump, and still 2,500 years later, alive. And finally, for the giant Pacific octopus, The Complete Poems of Emily Dickinson, edited by Thomas H. Johnson, which is the best edition of Emily Dickinson. I will die on that hill. We've never met, unless you count my passing acquaintance with disembodied flotsam, a deflated tentacle or two on the beach. But I think you'd like Emily, how she retreated to her den and doled out words, each poem's coiled complexity, delicious as a prawn's tail. So that poem is sort of the core of the weirdness of this book, where the ocean sort of enters the bookstore a little more and a little more. So I thought after that one I should read a couple poems about invertebrates, just to keep that in. How am I doing for time? Yeah. Okay. I meant to time myself, and I didn't. I always forget. I was so ready. This is called Starfish. It has an epigraph, first 2 lines. Red one, how strange the leavings of desire. Jen's Vicky, Apple Song. Beloved, I mourn your raspberry collapse. Osmosis dissolves the purple echo until you might never have been. Water, still as iron in rock's cupped hand. You were not a star, nor a fish, you ancient miracle of hydraulics, collection of conscious currents, linchpin, zipper, undoing an ecosystem with your death. You who could regrow from a fragment unraveled in one day. You carried an eye on each bloodless arm, but did not see this coming. And I think I have time to read the Nudibranch poem. How much time do I have left? I hate when people do this. Read the Nudibranch poem, and then a couple more books or poems, and then I'll be done. Nudibranch, you've all probably heard this one. Well, that's one way to deal with fear. Instead of getting harder, cast off the shell, become all soft underbelly, expose every bit of glowing skin, and dare the world to take a bite. What is armor but participation with the predator? Uncaged by calcium, flesh leaps like flame, canary, tangerine, violet, luminous cyan, ruffles of extravagant serrata so translucent bits of digestive tract are visible inside. The nudibranch takes a hydroid into its mouth, gently accepts the polyp's poison, saves explosive defense cells full of venom for later. O noble sea lemon, cryptic nudibranch, dubious dorid, shag rug, moss landing aeolid, O Spanish dancer, called ink spots, glaucus, clown, fuzzy oncodorus, teach me to be soft and inexorable. So there's lots more ocean poems in this book, but I'm going to go back to the bookstore because this is the bookstore and I have some coworkers here, which doesn't always happen. So this, I don't know if I've read this one here, not in a long time. This is called the Book Trade Counter. Should I do, okay, Book Trade Counter or weird poem about books attacking each other in the stacks? But I have one more after, okay. The Book Trade Counter. Ripples of water damage turn page to pool, paper's surface tension ruffled by unseen wind. The sound, when flipping through, will never be the same. A sharper crackle, turbulent waves. Shadow of sun damage, faded covers hold shelf-mate's silhouette, pages toasted, that flawlessly browned marshmallow right before it catches fire. Each book tells 2 stories, what's written on the page and what happened to the page. Loose binding where someone cracked the spine and drank its marrow, mysterious stains, a thumbprint, hopefully chocolate. Foxing, a sprinkle of freckles, the tiny creeping tread of trace metals as they rust the page. Cryptic notes and doodles, sea serpent, sparkly star stickers, underlining that stops abruptly where class ended or the reader gave up. From between pages, I fish out wedding photos, grocery lists, fall leaves, a blade of grass, a strand of cooked spaghetti, a sewing needle, and once a newborn's hospital record, the baby's footprint achingly perfect in crisp blue ink. And then I think I'll read Joanne's Dream, because Joanne is here, and this is so special. And then if there's time, I'll read Battle in the Stacks, but I might just finish with the dream. It's better to be too short than too long, right? The dream. In Joanne's dream, I open a bookstore on a moving train. We hurtle over mountain passes while I sell Emily Dickinson to the Pevensey children on their way to boarding school. Susan rolls her eyes. Don't you have any rupee cower? Where's your book talk section? Lucy elbows her and says, we'll take it, thanks ever so. But Caspian's horn drags them off to Narnia, book in hand, before they can pay. Shoplifting is rampant, even in REM state. I recommend Thich Nhat Hanh to Tom Riddle, but all he wants is Nietzsche. I persist and sell him on Marcus Aurelius. He was an emperor, you know. And let's be real, this is my dream now, not Joanne's. And the train rushes on, engine room ablaze in my chest. Miss Marple asks for 50 Shades of Grey, and I can't unsee the twinkle in her eye as she says, you know, dear, this book reminds me of Letty Smith, the postmistress in St. Mary Mead. And the train roars on, between chasms furred with snowy trees, past the resort where I had my first job. Younger me is standing by the trestle over Beaver Creek, watching us fly by, mouth sticky with unsaid words. And the train moves through moonlight and purple shadows, sliced straight-edged by lodgepole pines. Above, there are more stars than could possibly exist anywhere. Meanwhile, inside, I'm on the phone with TD to figure out why the debit machine stopped working. What do you mean you can't send a technician to a moving vehicle? A line starts at the register as we slip off the tracks and barrel down into the Pacific. I ding the bell for help. Okay, I'll do one more if you have patience. This is called Battle in the Stacks. This is it's a really weird poem. I don't know where these things come from. Battle in the Stacks. Science fiction started it, always imagining inconvenient futures, that one, and impulsive. Voted to secede from fantasy and form its own section on the top floor. Fantasy didn't care, off in its own world as usual, but political science was troubled by this shift in the balance of power. Fiction and literature shrugged, wondered, why such a furor over a trivial genre? But mystery and thrillers suspected foul play and called swashbuckling romance into the fray. Self-help and religion cheered them on, became the worst of the warmongers. Poetry sided with sci-fi. Dreamers should stick together, it said. Memoirs, too, decided in favor of self-determination. This way lies madness, warned psychology. Correctly, as it turned out, for soon every section in the store had taken sides. Only philosophy remained neutral, citing ethical objections to the arguments of both camps. Do individual sections truly exist, or are they merely a construct? It pondered. But no one heard, because at that moment, Americana annexed travel in a preemptive strike. That tore it. Books fell and shelves shivered. Next morning, employees opening the store were unwitting witness to the ravages of war. I think I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys.